Tim, I just want to say thank you so much for joining the In Their 20s podcast. This is going to be so much fun today, speaking about your career in a space that I have so much interest in, venture capital, working with founders. You're really, you're at the top and you've been in this space for a while. You've seen a lot. So excited to share your insights today.
Terrific. Well, thanks for having me on the show. It's kind of funny that I'm in my 60s talking to a group called In Their 20s.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it'll be great. We'll see how it goes.
Exactly. You've been around the block. You've seen things.
I hope the communication gap isn't too broad.
No, it's going to be wonderful, Tim.
Okay.
It really is. Knowing about, just especially the resources that you've been able to give, how to be a startup hero, your books. I mean, we're about to get into the nitty gritty. So before we really talk about your career, I want to bring it back even further because you were exposed to VC and, this area, capital allocation, very early. Your father was a pioneer also in the space. I'm curious, and I have this two-part question for you. What was it like being exposed to VC at such an early age? And what initially sparked your interest in wanting to pursue this yourself?
Well, my grandfather was the first venture capitalist in the Silicon Valley ever. And my dad was sort of a pioneer in venture capital. And when my friends, they said, yeah, my dad's a doctor, my dad's a fireman, or my dad's a, accountant or a ventriloquist or whatever. Everybody knew what those were. And I said, my dad's a venture capitalist. It always required some explanation. And my dad said, well, just say I'm an investment banker. And I said, well, yeah, that's right. But what do you do? And he said, oh, I invest in small companies and hope they get bigger. that was pretty much my explanation when I was younger. And then what got me into venture capital was that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I couldn't decide which company I was going to back. Well, I was going to start. I was going to either start a submarine company, a hologram company, a music, something that ended up being like iTunes, and digitized music company, or a company that is one big corporation offshore that allowed people to invest and then only pay their taxes when they repatriated. So those are my four ideas coming out of business school, and I couldn't decide which one I really wanted to dedicate myself to. And I realized that maybe I didn't have the DNA to be an entrepreneur because I was not focused enough. And so I clearly had the DNA to be a venture capitalist, and it was the right job for me.
Totally. I love hearing that because I really feel it. Me personally, I founded this podcast. I have many, I guess you can say, attributes of a founder. Like, it's fun to build things, but I think the question a lot of founders don't ask enough is, am I willing to spend 10 plus years on this? Sometimes even more. And to be honest, I haven't found that one thing, product, service, SaaS, whatever it might be, that maybe I can spend that long on. And that's what's piqued my interest in VC. I'd love to have my hands in multiple places. What I'm interested in today, I might be interested in another industry next week or next year that I want to really dive in on. So it's great to have that founder mentality, because sometimes building a fund, building a firm, a lot of VCs, and I think you'd agree with me, because we're about to get into building your firm, it kind of you're a founder. I mean, you've built something from nothing into something. So a lot of the attributes.
Yeah, it turns out if you are a VC, you do get some of that founder thing.
Yes.
You're really relying on other people to run their businesses. I think there's also something where I feel really good about venture capital, in that it allowed me to in effect decentralize decision making. And now that we have Bitcoin, a decentralized currency, I've been very focused and deeply thinking about decentralization and how important it is for a society. When a society is centralized, you have all these, you have individuals who are fallible, making decisions for huge populations. Like, I mean, Putin decided to go to war, and none of his people really wanted to go to war, and none of the Ukrainians wanted to go to war. And somehow he just decided to go to war. And so that was one of those centralized decisions that was just awful for many people. President Xi of China shut down, locked down all the people in Shanghai. And he didn't really realize the incredible repercussions that that would have on the global supply chain. He's basically destroyed a huge part of the global supply chain. There are boats that have been in that harbor for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, haven't been able to deliver their stuff. Now there are little cottage industries of people catering to those people who are stuck on those boats. And he decided that he just didn't like crypto because he felt he wasn't controlling it enough. And he just walked away from an incredible industry. All the miners left and all that stuff. So decentralization is sort of a motto I'm trying to promote. The idea that decisions are best made locally. Even the Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade about abortion is a centralized decision that might be good for sort of some of the population, but not good for another part of the population. And so whereas that decision made locally, it would work much better, so that we're not imposing one set of values or another set of values on another part of the population of the US. I think the more of those centralized decisions that get made, the more dangerous it is for people. I think it's, it doesn't really make sense to have a lot of like automatic guns in the cities, but it makes a lot of sense to have guns out in the country.
Totally.
And so having the cities drive the gun decisions probably isn't right. So all these decisions that are really difficult should be decentralized. So the decentralization of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies allows people to start thinking, hey, what else could be decentralized? And governance is definitely one of them. I think the decisions should be made first by the family, then by the community, then by the city, then, and the best presidents would be the ones who basically did nothing. But like my wife says, we have big decisions and little decisions, and Tim, you make all the big decisions and I'll make all the little decisions. We just haven't had a big decision yet. Mm-hmm. And I sort of think that that's the way a federal government or a state government should operate. They shouldn't be looking for more decisions to make. They should be just waiting for when the entire population needs some sort of a decision. And I don't think, like, Roe v. Wade shouldn't be a federal decision. That should be a local decision. That should be decided by the family first.
Yes.
So I don't know how we get back down there, but when the US was started, it was all about freedom and trust, and we trusted people to make those decisions. And the country grew and grew and grew, and it had an entrepreneurial feel to it. We created Hollywood, we created the Silicon Valley, we created the oil business and the car business. All those things happened because people were free to operate. They didn't have government intervention. And then when the government started to intervene, it killed off industries. So like railroads, government stopped the railroads because they decided they couldn't have more than 100 cars on them or something. They made a bunch of arbitrary decisions that didn't make any sense in a lot of cases. So it's best, and if you're running a business, it's best to decentralize and allow the individual generally to make the decision, because if you're the CEO of Amazon, you don't want to be the one telling everybody how they're supposed to bend their knees when they load the conveyor belt. That let them figure it out.
Another great thing with Amazon, I love that example. They're really focused on single-threaded leadership. People responsible for this, that, and this, and they're going to take care of their responsibilities. So, as a capital allocator, yes, it could be probably nervous sometimes. Hoping that your companies that you are investing in are taking care of their responsibilities and doing what they have to do. But at the end of the day, that's the bet that you have to make on these people, which is why the early stage is such an interesting area to invest in, because a lot of times this is before traction. This is before product market fit. I mean, way before a lot of times. And all you have really is, you can look at the market and you can see the problem that they're trying to solve with the actual tool or product service they're trying to put in place to solve that. But then also the team, you got to be able to judge character in a very fast, efficient, and effective way when you make these investments. But Tim, we're going to get even deeper to, some of these investments, because you've made some insane investments. I mean, everybody knows your track record. I don't want to spoil our listeners, but I have the list here, the companies. I'm really excited to see what did you see in these early bets, but we got to go a little before. Around age 27, 28, I believe, Tim. This is when you launched Draper Associates. Fun fact for people listening, obviously, but you were working in IB before. So my question here, this is targeted to emerging fund managers, people interested in making a big change in their life, even people who aren't into VC, people who are currently working at a job looking to make that big step. Why did you decide to bet on yourself at 27, 28 and leave IB and launch Draper Associates?
Well, half my job in investment banking was venture capital. I worked for Alex Brown and Sons. I guess they're part of B of A now. And that was a great experience. I had a couple of great bosses. But something I noticed was, while they had a fund and they had all sorts of stuff going on, they didn't know as much about the venture capital business as I did. And I thought, because I grew up in the venture business. So that was one of the reasons I went ahead and started. And the other reason was that there was kind of an interesting family opportunity. My dad had some companies in a portfolio that were worth they were private companies. They were worth about $2 million. And I was able to go out and it was in an SBIC, and they were kind of cats and dogs, but I was able to go to the SBA and use that as my the backing, and borrow $6 million from the SBA to get going. And I remember the SBA only had 4 people. The SBIC program only had 4 people working there, and they managed about 600 SBICs. By the way, today there are about 600 SBICs, but about 800 people managing. So clearly we've got bureaucratic bloat going on. But back then there were 4 people, and when I was applying, the guy was terrific, and we had a great conversation. He said, well, one of the criteria here is that you've had 10 years of investment experience. And I said, oh, I've been investing since I was 10 years old. And he just goes, check. And I thought, good, because I thought maybe I'd have to be investing other people's money or investing. It was just like, do you have some investment experience? Now I'm sure, now the criteria for an SBIC is ridiculous. They're, you get a full proctology exam before you get to start one. Anyway, that's how I got started with borrowed money. And after about 3 years, the SBA had moved me to their watch list and then to their dirt list and they were about to call the loan, and I flew back to Washington and said, no, don't call this loan. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And about a year or two later, we had 5 IPOs, and that was the IPO window kind of opens and then closes. It opened in 1991, and I had 5 IPOs, and one of them was Parametric Technology, and ended up being, now it still is. I mean, I think it's a $10 billion business. It's still the biggest software company in the New England area. And that was the beginning of my record. So I was able to pay back the SBA, go out and raise a fund. I brought in John Fisher. We went and raised a fund together, and had a really good experience. And then that fund went very well, and it was mostly software. And then we brought on Steve Jurvetson, and we had another great fund, and that was mostly internet companies. And then we had another one. But then things went, I don't know if you want to get into this, but in 2001, the markets started to slide like they have today.
Mm-hmm.
And it got very difficult to raise money. We were doing very well because we were investing in internationally, but our domestic fund had really suffered. And a lot of the things that happened were what's happening now, is that people got a little too tight with their money, and they that made it difficult for anybody to start a new business. It made it difficult for companies that were already going to grow because they couldn't raise money. So it was similar in that way to now, although even worse. And it lasted for a long time. And the regulators kept coming down with more and more regulations. They had this Sarbanes-Oxley. They made it super hard to go public. So that even cramped down on the capital markets even more. Of course, they always eventually come back. So that was good. But, and then at one point, we were on top of the world for a while. We had about 12 partners. And eventually I realized I needed to go solo. I had to be the sole decision maker because I felt as though I could make better decisions. So it was it's been a wild career. It's been great fun. We've done a lot of interesting things, but anyway, that's how it started.
Totally. And again, sounds very reminiscent of what we're seeing today in the world. When we see moments of uncertainty, you really need to take a risk. So Tim Draper, it's clear that you are one of the best risk takers out there. And I want to break down your formula for taking a risk in your 20s. And again, just to look at your track record, you've taken big bets on early stage companies like Tesla, SpaceX, Robinhood. You just mentioned that you made another big risk in '99, having the first firm in Silicon Valley to invest with offices overseas. That's a huge risk. And also, we can see the Bitcoin tie you're wearing right now. You've taken a big risk, with investing.
That was a big risk too.
Exactly.
Right.
So what's the formula for taking a risk in your 20s? Like, what is that advice that you would give someone watching right now that wants to take a risk in their career, especially during times of uncertainty? What should they be considering, and when do they know that the step is right?
Something that helped me when I was going through a lot of this decision making was, I guess I flash back to calculus, because in calculus they talk about the extremes. They say, what if it goes to 0? What if it goes to infinity? And then what's the likely scenario? And that, what are the limits? What are the limits of this? What are the limits of that? Well, for one thing, when I was in my 20s, I had a quiet confidence about myself. And when things started to go badly, all I just thought was, oh, this is just, it's like you're stepping from rock to rock to rock and getting across the lake. and you slip and you fall in, but then you're just going to get back on a rock and go again. And you're going to get to the other side of the lake. And I think that there was a little bit of that quiet confidence in myself. I always felt as though I was going to be successful. I think a lot of what we teach at Draper University is confidence. We make sure that the people have enough confidence to achieve what they want to achieve. And I think that's a big part of it. And that confidence can look like a cockeyed optimist. It can look like somebody who's just too optimistic. But if I have a pretty good sense that in all likelihood, if I stick with it long enough, it's going to be a big success, then I will do it. And sometimes it isn't. And I've been lucky because after the parametric success, I didn't have to worry about feeding my family at least for a year in advance or something, and we had a house. So we were kind of set in that way, and not, I was more in my mid 30s rather than, or in my 20s. In my 20s, I didn't know where my next meal was coming from. But that does make a difference, because then you can say, well, as long as I'm not putting my kids' future at risk, for the next couple of years, I can go ahead and try something. And then I look and I go, well, and if I try a few things, then maybe one of them will work and the other ones won't. And that would be okay. If they all fail, then, I'm kind of back to square one. And that kind of risk I was comfortable enough taking. And the Bitcoin thing, that was a huge amount of money for me when I made the investment.
Yeah.
And I made it because I had real confidence that this currency was going to be better than anything that was out there. And I had studied it in pretty good depth, because I bought a bunch of Bitcoin that I lost to the Mt. Gox thing way back, right at the beginning. I bought a bunch of Bitcoin and I lost it. But during that time, I thought, after I lost it to Mt. Gox, I thought that was the end of Bitcoin, but it wasn't. And I thought, oh boy, people really need this. They need this currency that's digital and open and transparent and keeps perfect records and all those things that Bitcoin does, global. And that's why I had that same kind of quiet confidence that this thing's going up. And I did know that if it went down, it was going to go way down, like to zero. But if it went up, there might be a theoretical limit when Bitcoin's at 10 million, but even then it could continue up, $10 million per Bitcoin. And so I bought it and I have just ridden it up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. And I have a sort of a real strong commitment to it, in that I just know that governance is going to have to compete with other governance. Governments are going to have to compete for you, for the young people, the workers, the businesses, the money, the whatever of the world. And they don't know it yet. They still think that they're geographic monopolies and they can do whatever they want. And they have been recently doing whatever they want. And I think that's a reaction to Bitcoin, where they sort of go, the internet they let rip because that was kind of fun and they got to interact with people internationally and all that. But Bitcoin changed the nature of their controlling currencies.
Yep.
They were always able to control their people by controlling their currencies. And now they can't control their people, and they haven't recognized that yet. They have to start thinking not about controlling people, but attracting people through trust and freedom.
Exactly.
And that's something they're not quite ready to do, or at least some of them. The smaller countries are loving this because they're saying, we've been at the mercy of the dollar all this time.
Mm-hmm.
We'd like to have something that's better. And this is better. It's just better currency. So that was that risk. But my risks on individual companies were not as drastic as you might think, even though those funds become very concentrated. So, whereas we'd lose probably half our companies, Tesla made a huge impact, or SpaceX, or Hotmail, or Skype, or Baidu. They all made a big impact on the funds they were in. And so in venture capital, you have a very diversified portfolio going in and a very concentrated portfolio coming out as time goes on. So I guess it starts as we're not taking too big a risk because we're so well diversified, but it ends with, yes, this is very risky because we're all relying on this one company.
Totally.
So I think in some ways it's riskier to start a business that is not a venture fund, but in some ways you're betting on yourself even more if you're going to be an entrepreneur. You're saying, look, I know that I know how to make money. I know that I can figure this out. And I know it's just one brick at a time. I'm going to build this business. You have that attitude, you could be a great entrepreneur.
And Tim, you mentioned that you're committed to Bitcoin. I'd even add another word there. You have strong conviction. There's something that I follow called entrepreneurial conviction. That's when you can't stop thinking about something. You really need to build it. You need to invest in it. You really need to be a part of it. So, you don't have to follow everybody else. This is for more of our listeners. But start to develop your own thesis, start to develop kind of a list of things that you're very convicted about, because when it goes down, you can see Tim is still very convicted about it and believes that it's going to go up and be fine. And that's conviction. When you really believe in something and you have data to support it, it doesn't matter if what goes up or goes down. Tim, this has been such an awesome conversation. I have one final question for you. And this will be a quick one because I know you're a super busy guy. Look, there are so many 20-somethings right now that are struggling, really upset that we haven't found our purpose or our passion yet. We're grieving over missing out on a college graduation, or the fact that we maybe still don't know what Bitcoin is. What is your lasting advice for 20-somethings? The one, because you've shared some wonderful pieces of advice, but that one thing that all people in their 20s should know.
Okay, well, since you have been through the pandemic, and a lot of you missed out on a couple of years of college. I mean, you had to do it through Zoom or with your family. I would think about that and say, okay, that was like having a gap year where I worked for my parents. I think if I had one piece of advice for every single person who's had to go through that, where they were separated from all these other people, I think you want to hug all your friends all the time and just get back to a society where we all are attached again, because the Zoom calls have allowed us to become a little unattached. And I think, go to the big events and get to know more and more people. And when you go to those events, ask everybody what they do. And if you can find somebody who's really successful, take really, like, where they are not trying to game it, take really close notes. It's worth it to sort of make friends with somebody older, because they will have something to say that might, at least for their generation, was the truth. or really good advice for their generation. But just take, and every piece of advice, take it with a grain of salt. I say go Bitcoin because I've got a lot of Bitcoin. Look deeply into the motivations of people as you go from one to the next, and never think of one as bad or one as good. Don't look at like, oh, he's a Democrat, so that's bad, or he's a Republican because that's bad. Don't look at it that way. Think this is a person, they're just trying to make it. They're trying to figure out how to survive. They're trying to do good things for people. That's generally what everybody's doing. That's what every religion is about. That's what every, everything is about. Every entrepreneur starts that way. So I would really connect as much as I could with the people that you would have been connecting with in college. And I would make those physical connections. So make sure that you're in contact with them, give them all a big hug, get to know them, what they're thinking about, what they're doing. And if you're going to be, you're talking about being a venture capitalist, the best thing you can do is to get to know lots of people and what they do, because your network turns out to be one of the most important things you'll have going. And your network starts with your family, grows to your friends, and then friends of friends and friends of their friends. So start tight and build out. And keep touch with your family, but you've probably had more family than you needed during college. During college, it was probably time to break away from the family. So you might, in that way, be a year or two behind. And so build up those social skills, and think for your next couple of years about your EQ and not your IQ.
I love that. Tim, that's why I really love talking to you. You're a businessman, you're a venture capitalist, but that advice was just life advice. That was so pure, authentic, and something that another reason why I love this show, because there are a lot of people that will be listening that aren't interested in VC, won't be pursuing entrepreneurship, but they need just the life advice. And I love how you just broke that down. That's for everybody. That's really good advice for everybody that can tune in. So I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for giving time, going extra as well, with how busy your schedule is. This was so much fun. I learned a lot and really, really appreciate you.
Good. Well, you did a great job, Landon. That you've got a talent there. So keep pounding.
Thank you, Tim. Enjoy the rest of your week. And I'm excited to stay in touch. And also just thank you to your team as well for helping put this together.
You bet.
All right.
Okay. See you later.
Bye-bye.